Hi, I'm Mark Donovan from HomeEditionPlus.com, and today I'm going to show you how to make real maple syrup. The first step in making maple syrup is to actually tap the maple trees. And here I have a 3-gallon bucket hanging off a maple tree. Basically I'll get about 10 gallons of sap from this tree over a season. You tap the tree in late winter, and the sap will begin to flow when the days get above freezing and the nights go back below freezing. We're going to collect the sap every few days, store it in a cool place below 38 degrees Fahrenheit, and then about every week to 2 weeks we'll actually go out and boil the sap down. The process of actually making the maple syrup comes down to basically boiling off the sap. Typically, on average, you need about 40 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of maple syrup. It can vary 30 to 50 gallons depending on the quality, sugar content of the sap. Prior to boiling the sap, I filter it through a cheesecloth, pour it into these containers, and then get them up to a rolling boil, and I let this continue and just burn off the sap until we get down to a more thick and consistent sugary condition. I will just continue to add more and more sap to these buckets as the sap burns off until I finally have all my sap boiled and I've got my residual maple syrup. You'll know the sap is at the point where it's pure maple syrup when you put a thermometer, a candy type thermometer, into the sap or maple syrup mixture, and the temperature gets to about 219 degrees Fahrenheit where it starts to boil. At that point I'll take all of this, the residual maple syrup, pour it into one pan and then cook it on the stove inside our house. I will say you want to do all the boiling outside. You don't want to have gallons and gallons of steam evaporating in your house. You'll create large moisture issues, so that's why we do it outside. Here we are in day 2 of boiling down the sap for our maple syrup. The container on the right has the more processed syrup or sap. You can see it's slightly more brownish compared to our other pan, which is more diluted at this point. Eventually we're going to transition this pan here on the right into this final pan to burn it down to the proper consistency. So now we have the maple syrup pretty much boiled down to almost the final consistency that we want. I've boiled about 32 gallons of sap. I'm hoping to get about 3/4 of a gallon of maple syrup out of this. So the first thing I'm going to do is take this maple syrup that's been boiling for the past 2 days and strain it through some cheesecloth in this colander into another pan, and then we'll boil it, continue to boil a little bit more. Now what we're doing is doing the final boil off of the sap to get the pure maple syrup. Basically we've got it on the stove and we're letting it boil off a little bit more. We'll let it cool down, then bring it back up to see if it doesn't start to boil to about 219 degrees. If it starts to boil at that point, we'll know that the syrup is ready. So now, while keeping the maple syrup still nice and hot, we're using a ladle and slowly pouring into a funnel that's got multiple layers of cheesecloth in it. And what's going to happen there is the sugar sand that's in the maple syrup will get filtered out through the cheesecloth. So we filtered it once. We're going to filter it now yet again. What we're doing is getting the maple syrup back up to temperature, and again we're going to ladle it into a strainer one last time before we'll finally call this syrup done. So here's the final product. We wound up getting about 2.5 quarts of pure 100% grade A maple syrup. It took us about 2 days of actually boiling around 32 gallons of sap to get this maple syrup. It went through about 2.5 tanks of propane, your standard grill size propane tanks. And we went through 2 filtration processes in the final product. I also did filtration a couple times, initially when I poured the sap in the buckets, as well as multiple times when I transferred from one bucket to another. So for more home improvement information, visit HomeEditionPlus.com today.